Welcome back to Daily Bible with Chris. This is our follow-up, our part 2 from our previous Daily Bible reading where we completed the book of Ecclesiastes. So we completed Ecclesiastes 9 through 12. So as I always say, if you've not already watched that video or read those 4 chapters, I would encourage you to do that first before watching this video, just to help things make a little bit more sense to you. So we're going to work through these chapters a little bit. Again, just bringing out some general thoughts and themes from this book as we conclude it today, and then we'll be beginning the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs in our next daily Bible reading. I would also encourage you to subscribe if you would, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and give the video a big thumbs up. Apologize for I don't know how my voice is sounding, but I think the fall allergies are starting to set in a little bit, so I got a little tickle in my throat, so I apologize for that. But let's dive right in together, of course, into chapter 9. Now, again, just kind of keeping an idea, we have the writer of the book, but we also have this character known as the teacher or the preacher that is telling us, instructing us here. And in a lot of ways, he's instructing us as showing life apart from God, or living under just this world is all there is perspective. Even though he mentions God from time to time, it's this kind of loose idea that there is a God and such, but that you're living your life in these different ways, whether it be pleasure, whether it be work, whether it be accomplishment, whatever it might be, trying to gain meaning out of life. And ultimately, he's finding that it's vanity, it's futile, it's got a kind of a better, I think from what I've read, Hebrew. It's called hesed is the Hebrew word there. It's like a vapor, like a smoke, and we know that life is referred to that same way too. Life is but a vapor. It's here and then it's gone. And so it's the idea that, and because he mentions the idea of someone trying to catch the wind. You can't catch the wind, just the same way you see smoke burning from a fire. You can't catch it. A vapor going up, you can't catch it. It's just here and then it's gone and it doesn't last. And so it's this idea, generally speaking, that seeking after things here on earth ultimately, isn't what it's all about. And that's kind of where we're going to get to at the end of the book here. But there is this recommendation that while you're here, this idea of this under the sun, like living here under the sun as if there's no authority above, that you just try to make the best of a bad situation. Everybody should make the best of a bad situation. And we kind of see that in chapter 9. He starts to look at the different groups of people, the righteous and the wicked, the fool and the wise. And ultimately, this is a book of wisdom, trying to ask for, wisdom and such, and for us to go after those kinds of things. But it's doing it in a different way than, say, the book of Proverbs. But he says, he says we have these different people. The wise person is trying to live wisely. The righteous live in this way. But yet they both end up in the same place. They both have the same fate, which is die. In other words, we're all going to die. We all have a rendezvous with death. And so there's no getting out of this, as the old Hank Williams song he wrote, he said, I ain't going to get out of this world alive. None of us do. Really, the only one who did is Jesus. Of course, he was resurrected. He did die and then he resurrected. But we have the case of Elijah and Enoch, who were taken up out of this world apart from death. But outside of those exceptions to the rule, everyone else will one day die or has an appointment to die. And so in the first section here, he kind of sees this as a bit of an evil, that why are they both going to the same fate? They're going to lie side by side in a grave. The idea of the fool goes down into the same ground that the wise does. The righteous goes down into the same ground that the wicked does. And he sees that as frustrating. And he sees it almost as an injustice. And he says it's better to be a live dog. In other words, you still have life in than a dead lion, right? The dead lion, what can he do? His purpose in life is over with. And he's just lying, moldering in the grave. Whereas a dog, even though a dog's not as great as a lion is, or at least seen in the animal kingdom, the dog still has life. And so while there is still life, there is an opportunity for enjoyment. There's an opportunity for understanding. There's an opportunity for accomplishment. So he sees this benefit of life over death. Now, we would look at it from an eternal perspective and say, yes, no one wants to die. Even the Christian, even the strongest follower of Christ doesn't look forward to death. We all fear death because it's the fear of the unknown. To a degree, we fear death. I think as people get older and older and older, they become more accepting of it. But especially when you're younger, you don't think about death. You don't want to do that. And we're going to see that at the end of the book here. But ultimately, we know for the believer that when this life ends, eternity begins. And so that's the blessed hope. That's the wonderful hope that we have. But again, none of us want to be separated from family members and friends and such here on earth, because this is what we understand. But once we do die, once we pass into the eternal, then our perspective certainly is going to change. And so he just kind of sees this idea, and that when we die, no one's going to remember us. We're all going to be just, dust. And so what was the point of it all, right? Ironically, the idea that we're looking back well over 2,000 years, more like 3,000 years, something like that, 2,500, 3,000 years. We're looking back at the writings here of Solomon, and we're remembering who Solomon is because of his writing. So it's kind of interesting there on that. And so he says, well, because of all of this, verse 7, the teacher says, well, then go have pleasure in bread and wine and enjoy it. Enjoy the food that you eat. In other words, don't hinder yourself from enjoying life. In other words, you should sit down and enjoy a good meal, or have a good drink and such together. You should do all these things because God, has allowed you to do that. Your clothes should be white all the time. The idea of white clothes in an arid, an arid, dry desert, not humid, arid, dry desert climate, the white reflects the heat. It's a little more comfortable than wearing heavy, dark clothing. So it's like, wear comfortable clothes. In other words, be comfortable. Don't wear things that are uncomfortable. Splurge a little bit. Have some comfort in your clothing. Let yourself have some anointing oil on your head, which would give you that perfume smell, and it's very sweet. So in other words, treat yourself a little bit in this life. Don't just be the person who, doesn't enjoy life while he's here. Enjoy your wife. Enjoy that companionship. Enjoy sexual activity with the wife of your youth. Ironically, considering coming from a guy who had 700 wives. Notice he doesn't say wives. He says wife. He probably understanding, I kind of messed up. I should have just enjoyed my life with one wife. But we see that because your days are fleeting. You don't know how long you have. So enjoy every moment. And we should do that to a degree. We should enjoy every moment of life and not let life become a drudgery, which it can become. Certainly there are pressures in life. There are financial pressures. There's relational pressures, whatever it might be. Some of them are self-induced. But they're there, and we just have to deal with it and understand it and know that this world is not all there is, right? And so if we have that eternal perspective that this world is not all there is, then sometimes maybe when we look at our life and we feel like we haven't accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, we haven't done what we wanted to do, well, while there's still breath in your lungs, there's time to do that, as long as it's a purpose and an accomplishment that's in keeping with God's will for your life. But there's still time to do it. There's never too late. But even apart from that, ultimately, what you acquire in this world is not going to matter. No one's going to care about that in eternity. What matters is, what did you do on the earth for God? That's what's going to matter. And so he says, everything you do on this earth, do it with all your strength. Do it everything you can, because none of your work, none of your knowledge, none of your planning, none of your wisdom is going with you into the grave. So, do all you can while you're here. And then he kind of sees, as he concludes the chapter here, he tells a story about a poor but wise man who saves a city because of his wisdom. And so it's not force of arms that saves the city. It's this poor man's wisdom that he had acquired. So even though he was poor, he was still wise. But yet he sees the irony that the poor man is not remembered for what he had done. He gets no benefit out of it. But yet he still says, he concludes at the end, that wisdom is still something you should strive for. In other words, even though he says wisdom is not all there is to life, we should still seek to be wise rather than foolish, okay? And we're going to see that here in a minute as we move into the next chapter. So he says, wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner can destroy much good. And so you can have a vast arsenal of weaponry, is the idea, but if you don't know how to manage it, it really matters not. There's been a lot of great empires that have been defeated by much more inferior armies and such that were more wise, more cunning, more strategic, and they were able to do that. And then in chapter 10, we kind of see this idea of foolishness. And this sounds a lot like, chapter 10 sounds like it could fit in the book of Proverbs. But notice here, the first verse 1, dead flies make a perfumer's oil ferment and stink. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. In other words, all it takes is one little foolish thing to destroy your reputation, your character, and potentially your life. In fact, my wife and I were talking about this last night. I'm not going to say too much here. I don't want to reveal, but we were talking about some young people who made one dumb decision, one dumb criminal, in some cases, potentially criminal decision, one dumb thing, they made one dumb thing. They allowed something to take control of them. They allowed something to do something. And now it's having harm, devastating harm to their life. Some may go to jail because of what they've done. Some are going to have something on their record for the rest of their life that they have to now live the rest of their life because they're young. These are young men. And sadly, we see it all the time. People that make one foolish decision that may cost them everything. They get a young person gets drunk, gets behind the wheel of a car, operates it drunk, kills someone, then they have to they spend the rest of their life in prison for killing someone because of one dumb decision, right? And so he's saying here just one little, I think there's the other phrasing in the book of Proverbs where it says the little foxes spoil the vine, right? It's the little things in life. It's those little things in life where we allow foolishness or we allow sin or whatever it might be in our life that can ultimately lead to our destruction. We think we can manage it, handle it, but it leads to so a little foolishness, a little folly, a little whatever in this idea, just one couple dead flies in the oil ruins it all, right? Same thing. You're cooking a beautiful stew, and you put all the ingredients in there and let one bug land in the chili, land in the stew, whatever, and it's ruined it all. It's no good. You throw it out, right? I mean, most people would throw it out. Some people might just say protein. I know, ooh, gross. And so he's kind of warning against that we need to make sure that we're applying ourselves to wisdom. He says, and then he says, sometimes the foolish person is the one that's given authority while the wise person remains in lowly positions. Sometimes it's not fair. And we certainly see that in politics. Sometimes some very foolish people end up in positions of power, whereas rather wise people end up in lowly positions and never advance. And we look at that and go, man, that's just not right. And so he kind of contrasts that with princes being the one acting as servants and slaves, and the slaves and servants being the ones in positions of power. And then he just kind of gives us these metaphors for things that people set up, and then it ends up costing them. He says he sees someone who digs a pit for someone to fall into. He's setting a trap, but yet he falls into his own trap. How often does that happen? We set up something to get at somebody else, and then we end up paying the price. He talks about a person who tries to bust through a wall and a snake bites him. The person who splits logs and endangers himself because the shrapnel's heading toward them, or the person tries to cut wood with a dull axe. It takes them twice as much effort to do it. These are all foolish things. And then verse 12, this sounds very much like it could come from the book of Proverbs. The words from the mouth of a wise person are gracious, right? Person who has control of their mouth is a wise person, but the lips of a fool will consume them. They'll get themselves in trouble with their mouth. The beginning of the words from his mouth is folly, and the end of his speaking is madness. The fool multiplies his words. In other words, you ever notice a very smart person sometimes, a very wise, smart person, can say a lot in very few words? But a fool sometimes, even somebody who's a learned fool, oftentimes just speaks a bunch of words. We call it word salad. Some people call it now, but you say a whole lot of stuff to appear to be wise and foolish, appear to be wise and smart, but you say a whole lot of stuff, but you don't make a lot of sense. And so that's the sign of a fool. You see somebody who cannot articulate in a few words, and maybe sometimes with me in here, maybe I'm a little foolish. I speak too much when I should just get to the point, Chris, and I have to watch that myself. And that's why there's that, let our words be few rather than a multitude of words. And so we see all of this. And then there's this idea. He says, woe to the land when your king is a youth and your princes feast in the morning. In other words, better to have an experienced person on the throne or a mature person. Doesn't necessarily mean a young person can't be mature. That's the idea. Is rather than age, it's maturity. He says it's better to have a noble person, the son of a noble, as your king, because an experienced person, generally speaking, will make a better king, a better ruler, better leader than someone younger that just kind of comes into it, acquires it maybe through a monarchy. They become king at a very young age without maturity, without wisdom. And then there's a warningness against laziness. Because of laziness, the roof of the lazy person caves in. Because of negligent hands, the house leaks. In other words, they see things around the house that needs to be done, but they put it off, and one day that roof caves in and kills them, or they have to deal with a leaking home because they don't take care of when the leak first starts, it becomes a big leak and floods the house. And so And then it's like, be careful about the king who brings you in at a feast and gives you a lot of feasting and laughter and wine and all these things. And he uses money to kind of buy people's attention and such. Be careful in that scenario, because you might speak up, say too much. You might curse the king, and the word of your curse might get back to the king, and you're going to find yourself in trouble. A little bird. Have you ever heard that phrase? A little bird told me. It's kind of right here. For a bird of the sky may carry the message and tell the king what you have done. It's that little birdie is all the way right here. And then chapter 11, we kind of have this recommendation that you should, invest yourself in your life. A very famous verse is right at the beginning. Send your bread on the surface of the water, for after many days you may find it. Or some translations say cast your bread. Now it sounds like what are we doing? Casting bread out there so we can feed the ducks? No, it's not that idea. It's the picture. It's an investment picture. This may have been even an allegory or an allusion to commerce, right? You've got money equals the money you have for bread and such. Maybe you put it out there on the water, on the ships that are going off. It's going to take, because it says, for after many days you may find it. It's the idea that you invest in something that's going to take a little while for it to give you a return, right? Some people say this is generosity. Give your bread to those in need, and God will bless you in return for that. That may be the case. Either way, the principle is still the same. The idea of casting it out there, you're putting it out there, not expecting an immediate return, allowing it to build and mature so that you then reap a benefit from it. And then we see here, the clouds are full, they will pour out rain. We look at nature, the tree falls, all these things happen. One watches the wind, but will not sow. The one who looks at the clouds will not reap. In other words, it's this person who's kind of, there's all these natural processes, and because of that, they don't take the necessary action. What good is a farmer who's always looking at the clouds going, that looks like it's going to rain, and never sows any seed? Or, hey, looks like there's bad weather, I can't go out and harvest. You're never going to get any benefit of it, right? So it's the idea that a person who, all these things happen, there are natural processes. You still have to go about your life. You still have to be wise. You do your work, do what you need to do. Don't let these things hinder you from that. And because you don't understand the processes of God, we see in verse 5, we don't understand how a baby forms in the womb of its mother and how the bones are. Those are all the mysteries of God. You don't know the work of God who makes everything. So just be busy about what you're supposed to be doing, taking care of your life, doing these things. In the morning, we see this idea, in the morning, sow your seed, and at evening, do not let your hand rest. In other words, find multiple ways to take care of yourself. In other words, if you're a farmer, get up in the morning, sow your seed. But then at night, don't necessarily, obviously there's a time to sleep, but at night when you're in the house, find something else to do that'll be of benefit. Whether it may be working something else, doing another project, fixing that leaky roof, or that whatever. Don't do all of these things. Find things to do. Then you will be successful if you do both of them equally good, because you don't know which one's going to give you the greater profit. So what you cast in the morning, if you put you ever heard the idea, don't put all your eggs in one basket? That's the idea here. Don't put everything, have multiple streams of income, I think is really the idea here, whether it's sowing seed or doing something at night. Maybe your wife is sewing clothes, or maybe you're, whatever. I don't know what it would have been back then for you to be doing at night. Maybe you're doing something, but it's the idea that you don't know which one is going to bring the most benefit. So do a bunch of things, and they may all equally provide for you. One may be greater than the other, but you don't put your eggs in one basket. And then verse 9, rejoice, young person, while you're young. In other words, enjoy your youth. Let your heart be glad in the days of your youth. Walk in the days of your heart and in the desire. Now, I'm not sure, the desire of your eyes, you got to be careful when you're young, right? But know that for all of these things, God will bring you to judgment. So we got that contrast. In other words, enjoy everything, go after that, enjoy your youth, but understand that one day you're going to stand before God. So we see this kind of starting to move to the fact that everything we do in this world is not just meaningless, that one day there is an eternal accounting that takes place for everything that we do in this world. So in other words, enjoy everything, enjoy the desire of your eyes, go after the things that God gives you within reason. Whether that be, success or a job or a relationship with a wife or husband. But just remember, one day you're going to give an accounting. But because God gives you this gift of enjoyment in this life, it should allow us to put sorrow and pain away from us and to enjoy the youth of our lives while we're young, because life is fleeting. Life is short. So enjoy the moment. Okay. Again, it's not the idea of just seek pleasure for pleasure's sake, but we should enjoy the time God has given us. And then chapter 12, we get to the end of the book. And again, this gives a little credence probably to Solomon writing this older, looking back. He says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of adversity come and the years approach, when you will say, I have no delight in them. In other words, this is the first time God is referred to in this book as the Creator God, right? And so he says, remember your Creator. Remember who gave you life while you're still young. Oftentimes when we're young, we don't want to think about life. We don't want to think about the end of things. We don't want to think about accountability. But also, I think the application can be made too, that it's the young person that's more open to hear about God, to give their life over to God. And while you're young, you have your whole life ahead of you to serve the Lord. I mean, it's great when people at the end of their life or older or middle age come to Christ. We certainly want that. But think about all the time that's been wasted living for the world when you could have been living for God. And so it's the idea here to remember Him. Don't get your mind off of that, because it can lead you to become like the prodigal son. You'll go out and do all these things and end up with nothing. He says, but and do all these things. Remember Him before the tough times come. I think the idea too is become secure in your understanding of who God is, become secure in your faith. So when the adversity comes, when those things happen, you have that firm understanding of who God is and your place in His place and your place in His plan for you. And then we have this kind of allegory here, or a little poetic, allegory is probably the wrong term, but a little poetic description, I think, of a person aging. Before the sun and the light are darkened, and the moon and the stars and the clouds return after the rain, on the day when the guardians of the house tremble, hands, older people have, young people can have it too, but older people begin to have trembles and things and such. The strength, the thing that was the guardian, are no longer strong. And the strong men stoop, right? Begin to bend over, right? So the women who grind grain cease because they are few. The grinders, the teeth, you begin to lose more and more teeth. So again, we're getting this picture, shaking hands, a bent over back, teeth, and obviously they didn't have dental care like we have today. So if you had a couple surviving teeth at the end of life, you're probably doing pretty good. And the ones who watch through the window see dimly. The eyes, what we see out at the eyes begin. And I'm telling you what, my eyes are getting worse and worse, but I'm vain. Don't want to wear glasses or anything, but I think the days are quickly coming when I'm going to have to bite that bullet, because it's harder and harder for me to see things at a distance and such, or words and such sometimes. That's why I have to keep this Bible kind of close. But the eyes grow dim. The doors of the street are shut. The sound of the mill fades. Right? We can't hear like we once did. One rises at the sound of a bird. We get up earlier. When you're younger, you tend to sleep till noon, right? Sometimes. But when you're older, it's like nothing for me to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. Probably going to be earlier than that at one point. And all the daughters of song grow faint. We don't even want to listen to music. Those things become annoying. We're afraid of heights and the dangers on the road. How many older people they become more fearful of things. They don't want to do things. They don't want to take chances of things because they're fearful of things. The almond tree blossoms. The almond tree, it's white, blossoms. The hair grows white. The grasshopper loses its spring. We don't have that energy we once had. The caperberry has no effect. For the mere mortal is headed to his eternal home, and the mourners will walk around in the street. And so we got this idea, it's coming. So remember your Creator when you're young, because one day you're going to be old. Do everything you can while you can, because one day you're going to be old, and then we're all headed to our eternal home. And then we have this beautiful picture of before the silver cord is snapped, the golden bowl is broken, the jar is shattered, the wheel is broken into the well, the dust returns to the earth as it once was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. So we see this idea of not just the body, but the spirit, the soul goes back to God, right? And so we do see this picture, and it's one of the more clear descriptions of what happens after. Contrast that with some of the earlier writings in here, but we see this clear because remember, the Old Testament writers a lot of times had a very murky understanding of what happened beyond the grave, because Christ hadn't come yet to really give us clarity of what happens of life and being with God and such. But we do see moments of clarity, and there's one here, the idea that the body goes down to the grave, but the soul is with God. The soul is with Him, and then He determines, based on what we are right in this point, righteousness, serving, fearing of the Lord before Christ, whether you would be with Him in His bosom, the bosom of Abraham, or paradise, or would you be in hell, or the Sheol, the holding place of the dead, wicked sinners. And so, but we see this beautiful picture of the silver cord, the gold bowl. That's life. Before that all is ended, in other words, before all that happens, again, it's pointing back Remember the day your creator. And then we see again how he began the book. Absolute futility or absolute vanity. Vanity, everything is vain, everything is futile, everything is smoke and vapor. It's here and it's gone. Again, that's that under the sun idea that what's done, it's here and then it's gone. But the idea is only what's done for God is going to last beyond this life. And then we conclude the conclusion. The teacher was a wise man. He constantly taught the people knowledge. He weighed, explored, arranged many proverbs. Again, kind of probably describing Solomon a little bit. He sought to find delightful sayings and write words of truth accurately. The sayings of the wise are like cattle prods, just like you have to prod an animal sometime to get them going in the right direction. These things here, these words, these hard words are here to try to correct us, to instruct us, to get us on the right path of wisdom and doing the things God has called us to do. And they're not enjoyable. They hurt. And those from the master of collections are like firmly embedded nails. Like there's just like laying on a bed of nails, how hard and painful that would be. Sometimes the hard things are, the sayings are given by one shepherd. Notice it's a capital S there. I think it's the idea this is coming from the shepherd, God himself, the good shepherd through his son, the Lord Jesus Christ. These things are coming to us, wisdom and such. It's the good shepherd that we listen to and follow. But the same thing, the teacher is trying to be a shepherd as well, trying to guide the sheep to wisdom and living their life with eternity in mind rather than just the here and now. Because if you just live life for the here and now, it's ultimately meaningless. Only what's done in it for eternity is going to last. While you're here, enjoy life, enjoy the good things when God gives them to you and blesses you. Obviously, bless him, thank him for it. We should be thankful and grateful for the bread we have on our table, the clothes we have on our back, the roof we have over our head that's kept us dry with rain the last 2 days. But he said, beyond all these things, my son, be warned. There is no end to the making of many books, and much study wearies the body. In other words, there's always going to be somebody writing a new thing, a new book, and we can strive after knowledge. But be careful that you don't make it all about reading the next book and trying to have greater understanding, right? The true understanding comes from following the things of God. It's not a saying you shouldn't do any of that, but you got to be careful that you don't wear yourself out chasing after knowledge all the time and miss out on life and such. How many people just sit on, how many monks have just sit in a monastery all the time? They're just about right about that. And how much of life did they miss out on? Now, we benefit sometimes from people that do that. The great writings and theologians and such down through the years. But I think Solomon's warning about having some balance there. Yes, striving after knowledge and wisdom is good, godly wisdom and knowledge, certainly. And we should read, obviously the Bible, we should read from good theologians and good apologists and good teachers of the Bible to us, good biblically sound people. We should do that. But at the same time, we should go out and enjoy life as well as God intended. When all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this. So, the teacher says, I've given you this whole big, long, flowing essay, this book, this speech, this, this thesis I've given to you. And here I'm going to sum it up. Here's the conclusion. Here's the final judgment, the final thing that we need to walk away from. Here's what we're supposed to do. After all of this, what does the teacher tell us? The author tell us, fear God and keep his commands. Because this is for all humanity, for God will bring every act to judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. In other words, fear God. That's the beginning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if you want to be wise, fear God, have reverence for God, live your life as if you're living under God's authority, live for him, fear him, reverence him, honor him, thank him, be gracious to him. And then the things he tells you to do in his word, do them. Do them, right? Do them. It's very much like the Ten Commandments, right? Right at the beginning, we should have no other gods before us. And then here's the things that we are not to do. And in contrast, they're the things that we are to do, right? And God gives us plenty of do's that we're to do, right? The first of all is we're to accept his son, the Lord Jesus Christ. We're to accept his gift of salvation. When he calls to us for salvation, we're to call upon his name, confessing him as Lord, repenting of our sins, believing what he's done. So it's confession, belief, repentance. That leads us to salvation, and we become one of his children. We become adopted into his family, and then we begin to store up eternal heavenly riches, things that cannot be destroyed, that, as Jesus said, that neither moth or rust destroy. They're going to last forever. They're going to go into the fire, and they will come out the other side. They will not be burned up as hay, wood, and stubble, which are the things of this world, or the things sown to the flesh. And so understanding that one day we're going to give an account. We're going to stand before God for how we spent our life, what we did in this life. He judges everything that we've done, whether good or evil. Ultimately, for the Christian, we stand before the Lord one day. It's going to be a matter of, first of all, what did we do with Jesus Christ? Every human being is going to face that accounting. What did you do with my son? Did you accept my son's gift of salvation through him, or did you reject? And then from that, there's a different level of judgment, because then it's judging on what all the sinful things you've done, and you'll then be cast into a place called hell, sadly. For the Christian, it's going to be, okay, so you've done that. I see Christ's righteousness on you, the robe of righteousness that you put on through my son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, there's going to be an accounting of what did you do for me after salvation? Not to determine whether we go to heaven or not. That's settled. But what rewards we will be given by God, you know? And so the crown of life, the crown of salvation we'll have, what other things we'll have. Ultimately, we will give those things back to God and honor, because he's the only one worthy of praise in any kind of thing. So the idea at the end is live life in fear, in reverence, and trust and obedience to God, and do what he commands. Follow his word. How do you know what God commands? Read his word. That's why we do this every day. That's why we do these Bible readings, so we can understand his word better and know how to live a life. So fear God, do what he's commanded you to do. Enjoy the life that God has given you. There's nothing wrong in enjoying the life within balance, but don't seek happiness and fulfillment in all the things of the world. Seek it in Jesus Christ. And then these other things, the things of life, God will add to us. We should be working hard, doing everything as unto the Lord, and let the Lord work. And whether we have little or we have much, let's be people of wisdom, people of the book, and people living our lives for him. All right. So hopefully that's helpful. So again, we're going to be starting a new book in our next daily Bible reading, a very interesting book too, certainly. But we'll be reading it because we read the entirety of all 66 books of the scriptures. So God bless you. I know this has gone on, but thank you so much. Hope that was helpful to you. Feel free to drop a comment. If you ever have a question about anything, if I don't know the answer, I'll look it up and try to get back to you. Make sure you subscribe and like the videos, and we'll see you next time in the book of Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, as it's called in some books. See you then.